Fellow Toastmasters, I was on Facebook recently, and there's a lot of really funny stuff you can find on Facebook. And this was one of the little cartoons that got passed out. And in it, it had the Arabs on one side of the table with the PLO and Hamas, and on the other side of the table was a Jew from Israel. And they were negotiating together, and they were negotiating against each other. And the Jew was like this, and the Hamas supporter had a sign, and it said, "Kill all the Jews." And then there was John Kerry in between them, and John Kerry said, "Come on, guys, we've been negotiating for years and years and years. Can't we just split the difference?" That was his solution. That's why John Kerry is no longer around. Thank goodness. Hooray for that. Why do we care about Israel? Why do we care? When I was arguing with somebody on the internet, they said, "What has it done for us?" And it got me thinking, maybe I should put some study into trying to figure out what is happening in the Middle East. Because we hear about it all the time. It's always in the news. Why is it important to us? And when you start doing some studies, it's very interesting to find out how good of an ally Israel has been to the United States. First of all, there is about as many Israeli Jews as there are American Jews. About 1.5% of America is Jewish, which ends up being about, I think, about 5 or 6 million. There's slightly more over in the West Bank and also in Israel proper. And 44% of all Jews are in Israel. So they have a lot of eggs in that one single basket, which is why they care so much about preserving their security, making sure that it's not invaded again. It has been invaded many times since it was established in 1948. The Arabs have attacked and been defeated on numerous occasions. And I wish I had that chalkboard up here so I could draw you a picture, but if you want to imagine Israel as a big ear, it has a big upper area, comes down, has a pointed bottom, and right in the middle is the West Bank. And Israel ended up gaining occupied territory in the West Bank to include both West and East Jerusalem. And now they're fighting over it because if you were to combine the Golan Heights, which is at the top of Israel, with the Gaza Strip that's at the bottom, and the West Bank that's in the center of the ear, like the ear canal, you'd have almost as many Arabs as you have Jews. They would be 50-50, essentially about 6 or 7 million of each. But most of the Jewish people are concentrated in Israel proper. 75% of Israel proper is Jewish, 25% Arab. In the West Bank and in the Golan Heights and in the Gaza Strip, it's the opposite percentage. About 75% are Arabs, 25% Jewish. They don't get along with each other too well, and that is why they're in the news. They're in the news because Israel has a democracy, and it wants to give equal rights to the Arabs to participate in that democracy, and for the most part that works in Israel proper. But in the West Bank, Hamas is in charge over there, and they don't want peace with the Jews. They want rockets. They want tunnels. And they want to set off those rockets. And so the net result of this has been that because they don't get along, there's now been a huge wall that's been constructed between the two populations. And I'm going to hand this out because until I did the research, I did not realize how big a wall this really was. So as that gets passed around, you'll see it's about a 50 or 60 foot tall wall that has been constructed the last 10 years or so between the populations that are primarily Arab and the populations that are primarily Jewish. And that has decreased terrorism, decreased attacks between the population by 90%. So building that wall has prevented terrorism. An interesting thing to know, because we now have a president-elect who also wants to build a wall and take those who are here illegally and put it on the opposite side of the wall when they're deported so they can't come back to America. And there are a lot of people who say, well, that's not going to be effective, that's not going to work. But the Israeli experience shows that it does work, and it has worked to decrease attacks between the two populations by 90%. Now, there's been a lot of different presidents who have been trying to negotiate between the Arabs and the Jews to have them be friends. And one of the big ones was the Camp David Accords. And the 1967 attack, Egypt launched a surprise attack against Israel, overran a good portion of Israel, but the Israelis fought back and were able to defeat the Egyptian tanks. And at one point had them caught over in the Sinai Peninsula and were ready to exterminate an entire army that had been cut off, was defenseless, did not have any type of support. And at that point, when the Israelis had the upper hand, they agreed to an armistice, and in exchange, the United States came in and said, we're going to pay you, Egypt, $1.5 billion a year to go home and play nice, and we're going to continue to pay you, Israel, $3 billion a year to go home and play nice, and we're going to give the Sinai Peninsula back to Egypt, and Israel is going to keep the Gaza Strip, which was located right down by that border in the Sinai Peninsula, and it got to keep as occupied territory, East and West Jerusalem, though they claimed that West Jerusalem has always been theirs and East Jerusalem should be theirs, but the UN has declared East Jerusalem to be occupied territory. And the Israelis have never been able to wrap themselves around that, because that's where all their important monuments are. A lot of the wall, the Temple Mount, a lot of the places that Jesus visited, but also that other Jews before them had visited, is over in East Jerusalem. So they don't view that as occupied and will never acknowledge it as occupied territory, no matter how many UN resolutions to that effect come out. So that's why there's some of this tug of war that goes on. And then the Golan Heights, that's where all the Jordan army and a lot of Hamas and Hezbollah from Lebanon had all of their artillery. And if you controlled the Golan Heights, you can, it's not that big of a country. You can hit most of the country from the Golan Heights. So there was no way the Israelis were going to give that back to potential future enemies. Now, when I was doing some research, I tried to figure out, okay, so the Arabs, are they mostly Muslim? 61% of them are Muslim. Then 20% of them are Christians of one type or another, and then other types of religion. So the Arabs are more of an ethnic group. They all speak Arabic, but they're not a religious group per se, even though 60% of them are Muslims of one type or another. The Jewish people are mostly Hebrew speakers. Then their second language in Israel proper is Arab, because there's 25% of the people in Israel itself are Arabs. And then English and Russian are spoken there, because so many Jews have immigrated from Russia that a lot of them still think of that as one of their mother tongue. And so many people speak English as a second language because we're their best buddies in the whole world. We make sure they don't get overrun by all the other Arabs. Now, I say that best buddies in the whole world because that's the way it should be, and that's the way it has been. But recently, you may have read in the news about a UN provision that got passed in the last couple weeks of Obama being in office. The UN Council is set up so that there's a Security Council of 7 people who can veto anything that we don't like that goes on. And the US is one of the members who has those veto rights. And so whenever the rest of the world decides to beat upon Israel, we veto it. There's 450 million Arabs, and there's only about 14 million Jews. So in any type of democratic society where the Arabs and the Jews don't like each other, they're outnumbered 450 million to about 14. So we have used our veto power to say, yes, we do like democracy and we do like the United Nations, but we're not going to let you violate the rights of the minority, which in this case happens to be the Jewish nation. We're going to stick up for it, and we're going to veto all these negative, nasty things that you're constantly saying about Israel and the Jews. Well, Obama, as he left office, decided that he was not going to do that, and he allowed, for the first time, a provision to go through that basically made war criminals of every Israeli who was trying to have a settlement in the West Bank area, any soldiers that were defending these people, even when they're on the right side of the wall, and also claimed that anybody in the east part of Jerusalem was in occupied territory and committing war crimes. Now the Israelis in 1980 annexed the east portion of Jerusalem, so they consider that their territory, and now you have the United Nations without it being vetoed saying a good portion of your capital is now occupied territory that you're illegally occupying and you're a war criminal for being there. That's what ended up happening. That's why there's such a stink about what Obama did when he left. So much so that even some of the Democrats have come out against it. Alan Dershowitz, who I don't normally like to quote because his and my politics are not anywhere in the same sphere, but he does have a lot of credibility with a lot of the liberals and a lot of the Jews, and he came out and he said, we just got stabbed in the back. We just got stabbed in the back by Obama. This is unconscionable. And Schumer has also come out and said something similar to that. So even Obama's normal allies have come out with statements that this was horrible, what they had just done. So now we know why there's a problem. Now we know why it's always in the news. What have they done for us? Why do we like them? Well, besides the moral issue that we should stick up for people who stick up for us, and they've been great allies, let's look at some of the ways they have stuck up for us. Back in 1981, Iraq had a nuclear reactor at Erik. Now, interestingly enough, Israel is a nuclear power. Israel is a nuclear power because they have a nuclear plant basically built on the exact same operating procedure and principles as the Erik reactor. And they were able to get enough plutonium so that now they have between 40 and 400 nuclear weapons. So they know that all you needed was one of these reactors and you could get the fuel you needed to have bomb-making material. Now the rest of the world was in denial, similar to how we're currently in denial with Iran. They were not in denial. They planned an attack. They executed it. Everyone criticized them for it until recently it was acknowledged by Bill Clinton that it was a great thing that they did that because it saved us from having to do it or finding some other way to sabotage it. So even the Democrats will every now and then acknowledge something great that Israel does when their defenses are down. This was certainly a case of that. They also blew up Syria's reactor in Deir ez-Zor in 2007. Same reactors used by the Israelis to make weapons. They knew that's what these were for. The people that were having them say, oh, it's because we need energy. They don't need energy. They're sitting on oil. They have all the oil they could possibly need. They want it because they want power, and power comes from nuclear weapons. Iran's efforts at obtaining a bomb were also hampered by Israelis' targeted assassination of Iranian nuclear scientists. Now you might say, that sounds bad, targeted assassinations. And yet, what did we do after 9/11, when we had a couple of our buildings blown up? We went on offense. We didn't just play defense. We didn't just wait for things to happen before we then tried to collect all the bodies and figure out who we could pin it on and go arrest them and put them in jail. We had this thing called preemptive defense, another word for offense. And under George Bush, we actually invaded and took over all of Iraq before it was given away by Obama to ISIS. Well, where do you think we learned those tactics from? We learned a lot of those tactics from Israel, that lives in the middle of a war zone, that doesn't get the advantage of treating everything like a police action. It's at war. So they didn't view it as a bad thing to kill Iranian nuclear scientists. They thought they were saving their own lives. Remember, 44% of them are in one little basket called Israel. One nuclear weapon, they're wiped out. So what other types of military cooperation do we have there? We currently have $1.8 billion in supplies stored there for the next major conflict. When we had to go into Desert Storm, a lot of the troops that were supplied from forward bases that were in Israel. A lot of our politicians have called it the aircraft carrier that can't be sunk. Because when you have a forward base like that, you have the advantage of having all of those supplies there. You have an Air Force base, you have what you need to project power into the region. 90% of U.S. aid to Israel is military, and 75% of that is used to buy our own equipment back from us. So we have a huge number of weapon systems that we have developed together. And intelligence has been really very close. A couple times defectors have flown MiG-21s, MiG-19 jets into Israel. They've all been taken apart, disassembled, reverse engineered, and all of it has been shared with America. There's some of our senators have claimed that the amount of information and intelligence that we get from Israel is the equivalent of 5 CIAs. 5 CIAs, we get that much cooperation from. What else have they done? The anti-ballistic missile defense system. We had a law in this country, we couldn't develop it. We couldn't develop it. We went to Israel, we said, we can't develop it. How would you like us to pay you money so that you develop it? And once you figure out how it works, we'll get out of this treaty, we'll share the results. You're less likely to get hit by a nuclear bomb from Iran because we'll be able to shoot it down. And the same with us. Israel said, that's a great idea. So we cooperated with them, we developed the entire system. So at the time that we did get out of the treaty with Russia, that they were cheating on too, so we had to find a way to legally cheat on it, because we're a nation of lawyers. So that's what we did, and we now are not afraid of somebody like North Korea, who recently put some ballistic missiles together and is threatening to bomb us with one of their nuclear devices, because we have a system that's 50 or 60% likely to shoot it down. I mean, it doesn't make us sleep great at night, but we do sleep better. And as that system gets better and better and better, eventually we'll get up to 70 or 80 or 90%. And then we will sleep a lot better. So, what is my goal here tonight? My goal here tonight is to talk about the value of friends, the value of allies. This is one of our best friends in the area. We can rely upon them. We have a history together. They like us, we like them. We have a Judeo-Christian heritage that we share in common. We share the 10 Commandments, and we share a desire to protect ourselves from terrorism and from people who want to take advantage of us, and from Iran, which is on its way towards developing a bomb. And let me ask you a question before I leave. Iran has promised that if they get the bomb, they're going to drop it on Israel. They hate Israel. They call us the Great Satan. What if they irradiate all of the oil? What if after their first bomb drops on Israel, blows them up, and the second bomb on Saudi Arabia, so that none of our oil can be used because it's all radioactive? What do you think is going to happen to America then? I'll leave that for you guys to think about. Fellow Toastmasters.